Hey guys, and welcome back. In this section, we're going to be changing the color of a dress using a color balance adjustment layer. Now, the cool thing about this is you can adjust the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows separately, which will give you some really great options for adding complex color to objects. All right, jumping in here, we're going to open up our intermediate coloring 2. Let's go ahead and open that up. I'm going to hit F for full screen, and we're going to go to layer, down to new adjustment layer, and here we're going to go down to color balance. All right, let's hit OK. So the first thing we need to do, let's just zoom in, and I need to go ahead and work on my layer mask because right now it's obviously just going to do my entire image. So I'm going to crank my green all the way up just to see what I'm doing here. So on my layer mask, let's hit Control or Command I. It's going to invert the layer mask. There we go. And now I'm going to do a super quick selection around the interior of the dress. There we go. Just going really quick. This is just going to make sure that I get the entire interior of the dress colored. There we go. And on my layer mask, I'm going to hit Shift, Delete, and fill that with white. There we go. And next, we're going to go ahead and go to Select Color Range. So let's create a new layer. I'm going to go to Select Color Range, and let's just select this lighter area here. There we go. That's just going to be for, like, you can see all over here. I'll hit OK there. And then on this layer mask, I'm going to paint that white. All right, and that's just going to make sure that all that area gets colored. See, I just made a quick selection that helped me get all that really quickly. Okay, and next we're just going to go ahead and paint with the brush tool here. So I'm just worried about the edges now. I took care of my interior. There we go. Already using the lasso tool. All right, and we are doing the interior here, or the exterior rather, but you're gonna notice there's a little bit of pink like on the floor. You can see right here, right? And that's that's basically because of the reflection of the dress. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure we have a nice selection of the dress to start. And then we'll just add a little bit of feathering there on the ground, and that's going to help it look like the reflection actually carries through. All right. There we go. And again, at this stage, I'm just using my layer mask to paint this in. And I went ahead and made it green just so I could see what I was doing, really. All right, almost done. And it looks like this image it's a stock photo, but it looks like maybe this was colored just a little bit already. There's a little bit of the blue from the floor here kind of popping up on that dress. So I'm like, maybe this dress has already been colored in Photoshop. We're gonna recolor it. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and speed this up. I'm just literally just gonna paint around the rest of the dress. Okay guys, we did most of our layer mask. Now I'm gonna go ahead and zoom out, and we're gonna take a look at a couple of these areas. You can see where it kind of hits the floor and the reflection of the original dress is just a little bit apparent there. So what I'm gonna do is make a large soft edge brush. So let's go ahead and make our brush large, and you can right click and bring your hardness all the way down to 0. There we go. And now I'm gonna bring the flow of my brush to about 10%. So I'm gonna hit Shift 1. And that's gonna bring our flow to 10%. So what this is gonna allow me to do, let's just do an example over here, is see I can just do a slow build up. There we go. Just doing this super slow, and eventually this green is gonna come in there. But you can see how slow that kind of starts, right? I'm painting on there. It's got a little bit of green on there. You can barely see it, a little bit more and a little bit more. So the nice thing about doing it like that is I can kind of like build up that effect until we get the green reflection there, and then I just stop. I just like move on and go to another place. So when the pink on the floor is just starting to be replaced by the green, that's when we know to stop. And this is one of the big keys for changing the color of things in Photoshop, because again, color, and light, they reflect and they kind of bounce everywhere. So you got to make sure you get those reflections in there too, or you're going to wind up with something that doesn't look very realistic. There we go. So you can see, keeping it really nice and subtle here. Just making sure that pink goes to the green. And as soon as it does, then it's time to move on to another place. All right. There we go, looking really good. So, I just did that color balance. I just cranked it to green just to see what I was doing. But let's go ahead and make sure that it does, in fact, work. And that you can see, like here, some areas down there, we do see the reflection of the green as well. Okay, so we made the layer for the color balance adjustment layer. Now we got a couple more steps to do with our dress. So I'm gonna lay down a base of color with a hue saturation adjustment layer, and then we're gonna make a couple of these color balance adjustment layers. And the cool thing is we don't have to make that layer mask ever again. We already made it, so we're good to go. So let's go ahead, we're gonna grab our adjustment layers, hue saturation to start off with. There we go. And to copy the layer mask, hold Alt or Option and click and drag that layer mask from one to another. Okay, and then I'm just gonna duplicate the color balance as well. So we've got a few things going on. We're gonna do the base color with the hue saturation, and then we're gonna do the highlights and shadows separately with color balance layers. So really cool. Color balance adjustment layers do allow you to adjust your highlights, midtones, and shadows. And if you want to add even more control, you can use Blend If to really fine tune those. All right, so let's go ahead and make this dress blue. So I'm going to make all these invisible. We're going to just double click here on our hue saturation adjustment layer, which brings up the properties. And I'm going to go to colorize. There we go. So we're going to start off with a blue. And I'm looking pretty much in the midtones here. I'm not looking to make the shadows perfect. I'm looking right here in the midtones, and that does look pretty good. Okay, so we're looking pretty good in the midtones, but you can see the shadows here are looking pretty desaturated and kind of muddy. So that's where the first color balance layer comes in. So let's go ahead and make that visible. I'm just gonna double click there and call this shadows. And here we're gonna work on our shadows. So to start off with, I'm gonna put some more blue into the shadows, and you can see it doesn't affect the color of the overall dress, and color balance layers are pretty subtle. So adding a little bit more blue in there, you can see it really does help make that look more realistic. So it's kind of muddy to start with, and then we're gonna add some blue. I'm gonna put a little bit of cyan into the shadows as well. All right. Now, turning this off and on, you can see it does affect the highlights just a little bit. So we can always double click on this layer, which brings up our layer style. And here we have Blend If. So I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and tell this not to be visible where the underlying layer is lighter, just where it's darker. So already I'm telling the layer to I'm only changing the shadows, and then I went ahead and refined that just a little bit more. So it's only affecting the shadows in the adjustment layer itself and in Blend If, because I told it not to be visible where the highlights are. Pretty cool. Now we can do the same thing with the highlights. So let's double click here. Great, call that highlights. And we're gonna change the highlight value, and we can start pulling in other interesting colors into the highlights. Like a little bit of green, we can pull in a little bit of red into the highlights, maybe some yellow into the highlights. We can really change these to be just about anything we need. Now, especially if you want to kind of match the color of the light in the room, that's when you want to start working on your highlights. And it is a little bit on the cooler side. There we go, that looks good. Now I'm gonna click on this preserve luminosity. Sometimes this helps out, sometimes it makes things worse. So in this case, you can see if I check that, it's making it worse. It's kind of like we're losing detail there. So I'm gonna make sure to uncheck that. There we go, cyan and a little bit of yellow. That looks really nice. Now let's double click here, and I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and go from the left to the right now, and that's gonna make it disappear from the shadows. Okay, so let's make them all visible here. So you can see this is literally just doing the highlights, and it's subtle. these color changes are relatively subtle here. Color balance is always going to be subtle, but it's super, super powerful. So let's make this invisible and visible again. There we go. And you can see the shadows here. All right. I think the shadows, you know what? I think we need just a little bit, in order to match this a little bit better, I think we need just a little bit of magenta. You can see if we're too far to green, it doesn't really match what's going on the floor. I think we need just a little bit of magenta. There we go. And that's matching much better with what we have there. There we go. And I think this looks really, really nice. So we did our base with the hue saturation adjustment layer, okay? And you can see it looks okay, not great yet. Shadows with our color balance, and then another layer of highlights with the color balance. And this looks really good. It looks like this dress was blue when it was photographed. And that's the whole goal with changing colors in Photoshop. So in this one, I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know what? I loaded 3 layer masks for each of these. You know, each of these I put the same layer mask on. And looking at this, I'm like, I probably could have done this a better way. So let me go ahead and show you what I think is actually a better way of handling the layer masks. I'm going to group them all together, okay? And then put a layer mask on the group, and then just put the layer mask from one of these. You hold Alt or Option and click and drag, and the layer mask is going to go in the group. That way, because I was looking at this and I'm like, you know what? I missed this little area right there, okay? But if I wanted to change that, I'd have to now change that on all 3 of these layers. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just do it on the group. So let's just click on each of the layer masks now. I'm going to hit Shift Delete, which is the keyboard shortcut for the fill dialog. And I'm going to just fill all those layer masks with white. And now I only need to adjust the layer mask on the group. So let's hold Alt or Option just to click on this group and make sure, there we go, that I did in fact paint on the inside of everywhere I meant to. It's a really good way to just check your work. Hold Alt or Option and take a look at your layer mask. There we go. Make sure to paint black over there because that was outside of the dress just a little bit. There we go. All right, and all this stuff, remember down there, that's all the bleed down there where we wanted a little bit of the color to kind of like get on the floor as well for the reflection. All right. And there we go. Looking really nice. So again, we can just have one layer mask that kind of handles everything rather than worrying about the multiple. And you know what? I'm going to put a little bit of bleed here as well because I want a little bit of this color to kind of be visible on the arm, right here in the shadow, and here in the hand. So again, just B for the brush tool, just a large soft edge brush, a really low flow, and I'm just going to paint just a little bit on here. And then when it looks like it's got a little bit of that color, then it's time to stop. There we go. All right. So there you can see, let's just zoom in so we can see on her arm as well. Just a little bit, you know, we don't need a lot. A little bit is, you know, it does the job. So that color, and no matter what we change these colors to, that color will be represented on her arm as well, because it's for the layer mask for the whole group. So no matter what we change these to, it's going to change the shadow colors as well. All right. Good deal. Well, there we have it, guys. Really nicely colored. Highlights, midtones, and shadows. You can see that makes a big difference there. And overall, super happy with the image. And yeah, I hope this helps out. So you can see if you do wind up coloring using multiple different adjustment layers like we did with this one, go ahead and group them all together and then put the layer mask on the group. It's just going to make things easier. All right, thanks so much, guys. We'll see you in the next example.